let me ask you all a question. Who's frustrated with the direction of our country and the economy in general? I think nearly everybody. And I think that would be Democrats, Republicans. I think we're all frustrated. We want to do better. I think Americans are by nature positive. So my job today is to cheer you up. I want to talk about areas where Georgia is succeeding. And we don't do a very good job sometimes of marketing those successes. But we're going to talk about our challenges, but in the context of how can we take our strengths and apply them to those challenges. So let me get my clicker out here. So let's get going. I want to talk about first things that we make, these traditional industries that we've been doing for a long time here in Georgia: agriculture, mining, manufacturing, forestry. We have been the king of many of these. There's so many areas of agriculture we could talk about. But you think about the 3 Ps: poultry, peanuts, and pecans. I grew up in Ellijay, Georgia, not far from the poultry capital of the world, Gainesville. Some other people would throw in another P: pine trees. We're the largest state east of the Mississippi. 67% of our land area is forest. That means we have the most commercial timberland of any other state in the country. Most all of that is privately owned, as opposed to out west where the government owns most of the land. And we make great use of it. We're #1 in producing paper products. Half of the world's supply of turpentine comes from Georgia. That's a fact that I did not know until I started looking into this. Mining. We mine lots of products, a lot of marble. Elberton, Georgia is the granite capital of Georgia. Kaolin, we're #1 in the country. It goes into products from kaopectate to China to many, many more. And something I learned today talking to Lee Lemke, who's here from the Georgia Mining Association, one of the reasons that we're excited about manufacturing is the cost of energy through fracking has lowered the cost of energy. And so we're seeing companies come back. They take these manufacturing facilities from offshore, bring them back to the United States. Also helps that the General Assembly reduced or hopefully will eliminate the tax on energy in manufacturing. So that's helping make Georgia a really compelling place to make things. But what I didn't realize is we're benefiting from the fracking in other ways. Lee tells me when you frack, you fracture this rock deep down under the earth, but you have to keep it from closing up again. So you have to have these beads that hold those crevices open so the gas can escape. Well, guess where they're producing those beads? Georgia. They have 3 separate plants. Millions of dollars have been invested so that we can manufacture those beads in Georgia to send them up to North Dakota and other areas where they're producing this natural gas through fracking. Carpet. Dalton, Georgia is the carpet capital of the world. And of course, there is a company that does a much better job than Georgia of marketing itself, and that's Coca-Cola, the world's largest beverage company. So let's talk about things other than your traditional economy. And this is where Georgia really over the last 20 years has taken off. And this is some of the things, if you haven't been paying attention, you might not know about. Just in the last 2 years, I've seen one of our weaknesses, this innovation ecosystem that's so important for startup companies. We had some weaknesses in those areas, but we've really seen those things start to explode, and it's incredibly exciting. Technology companies, we're in the top 10 in the number of companies. We're in the top 4 in the growth rate of those technology companies. You look at logistics. Now think about, these are the things, sort of like those service economy jobs that you can't move offshore, our infrastructure. I mean, imagine what we've got, the world's busiest airport. You can't just, if South Carolina said we're going to compete with Georgia and create the world's busiest airport, you can't do that overnight. 2 deep water ports. The port in Brunswick, for the 2nd year in a row, has imported more vehicles than anywhere else in the country. The port in Savannah is North America's 4th largest and fastest growing. We have 2 major railroads that come through our state. We have the Southeast's largest railroad hub. We have the most extensive surface transportation network in the country. So it's not really surprising that we've seen all of these logistics companies spring up in Georgia. Of course, UPS is the one you think of, but there are lots of smaller companies all over the state. The app economy, we've all got smartphones. Many of those companies that are designing apps are located here in Georgia. Telecommunications, We've dominated that area for many, many years. We sit at the crossroads of two of the country's major fiber optic lines, and that has given us a great advantage. We are a leader in the country in broadband penetration, both wired and wireless, and it's really amazing thinking about that we're a very large state and a very rural state. We're one of the leaders in getting broadband coverage out into rural areas. There's still a few pockets that we have left to address, but we've done a great job of doing that. Data centers, another up-and-coming area. Because, knock on wood, we're not as susceptible to earthquakes and hurricanes. We have low-cost, reliable supply of electricity, and we have that fiber optic infrastructure. That's another area of growth. Information security. Now, we've all heard about the NSA and its snooping. We've heard of espionage from companies, other countries, hacking. This is a problem that's not going away. This is an industry that was really born in Atlanta. Two Georgia Tech graduates created internet security systems, sold it to IBM down the road, and we've continued to dominate many more spin-offs in this same area so that now 25% of worldwide revenues in this sector are going to Georgia companies. And this is the one that you may not know about. It's not the sexiest thing in the world, but global payment processing. 70% of all the payments in the world are processed in Georgia. So imagine someone in Brazil swiping their credit card, or somebody using PayPal in Russia to buy something on the internet. It's likely that that transaction is coming through Georgia. The economic impact of that one industry is even greater than the film industry that we talk about so much. But most people don't know that we have it here in Georgia. Pretty exciting. If you didn't read about it in the newspaper today, we have a Georgia-based company, while we're talking about finance, that is getting ready to finalize the purchase of the New York Stock Exchange, which is appropriate since, speaking of marble, the marble in the New York Stock Exchange is from Georgia, by the way. And while we're bragging, we also might point out that a Georgia-based company has also bought the Harlem Globetrotters. So let's talk about where we're falling behind. And we've pulled together 3 statistics that really sort of characterize what we believe are our greatest challenges. And that's an area of criminal justice, healthcare, and education. And if you add those areas together, not only are they great challenges, but the state level, the local level, the federal level, that's where we're spending most of our money. So here are the statistics. You've heard this one before because we first started talking about it at our first legislative forum. 1 out of 13. That's how many adults in Georgia are under correctional supervision. We're number 1 in the country, something we don't want to be number 1 in. But I can promise you that number is going to change, because what you and the General Assembly and the governor and working with the judiciary did over the last couple of years is pass sweeping reforms to our criminal justice system, both the juvenile system and the adult system. And we're going to work to change that number. I was in Oklahoma City last week at a conference along with Taryn and 1,000 other policy people. And guess what the subject was? The subject was, how can we do in our state what you all did in Georgia in criminal justice? So that's something we can be proud of. 69.7. That's our graduation rate. Now, it's gone up in the last few years, and that's good. But we cannot continue to let so many of our students fall through the cracks. And in fact, when you talk about economic opportunity, as we've talked about today, that is the beginning of it. Because if you don't have at least a high school degree, much less further education, and our economy is going to be difficult for you. You're probably going to struggle the rest of your life. So I think we all know that's a real challenge for us. Finally, 30. Now, we've got great healthcare institutions. We've got the CDC, we've got Emory and Georgia Tech. We excel in regenerative medicine and neuroscience and bioscience and all these things, health IT, all these great industries. But we have third world healthcare conditions in many of our counties. In fact, the life expectancy in 30 of our counties is below that of third world countries like the Dominican Republic. Now, that's a problem. So what do we do about it? Well, if you drill down into solving education and healthcare really gets down to great teachers and great doctors. Access to great teachers and great doctors is really what we're looking for. Whoops, I went too far. Oh, missed a slide, that's okay. What we've got to do is figure out how do we recruit more of these individuals, or, as we were talking about before, make them more productive. Now, before we go on to that, let me talk about one unique situation that we have in Georgia that I think we can apply to some of these problems. We do great with big companies and small companies. Fortune 500 companies. In Georgia, we're in the top 8. If you just look at cities, Atlanta's number 3, right behind New York and Houston. But we also do great with small companies. We were ranked number 1 in terms of entrepreneurial activity. But big companies and small companies have different problems. Big companies, you have to innovate to stay ahead these days, constantly innovate. It's hard for a big company to innovate. They need these small startup companies to do that innovation. But our small startup companies, they need things from our big Fortune 500 companies. They need customers, they need capital, and they need mentoring. They need management that knows how to scale, how to get big and market and grow your business. Well, what we've been seeing develop in Georgia is this great ecosystem where our big companies are starting to work more with our research universities and with our small startup companies. And that's making a huge difference. Now I want to talk a little bit about an example of how that's worked. Well, here we are in Nashville, Georgia. Now, many of you may not know where Nashville is. It's down near the Okefenokee Swamp. It's about an hour drive from Valdosta. The Georgia Partnership for Telehealth has been very active in telemedicine, talking about getting access to health care and doctors to individuals. Well, imagine you're an hourly worker and you get a phone call from the nurse saying your child's sick. Now, you may work in the next town over, so that means you're going to have to call and get an appointment with the pediatrician in Valdosta, an hour away. Got to drive to pick up your child, go wait at the doctor's office, maybe you have to go by the pharmacy on the way home. Your whole day's blown. Now, that's money that you needed to earn to pay the bills. What they've done here is, with the parent's permission, the nurse can schedule an appointment with the pediatrician who you see on the screen there in Valdosta at the school, so the child doesn't miss much school, the parent doesn't have to miss work, and the doctor can see more patients. And the school nurse is there to operate the equipment and look into the ears, see if they have an ear infection, do everything almost they could do in a normal office visit. But what's really exciting about that is the equipment that you see there, the camera, the screen, even the stand and the software was all built in Georgia, every single bit of it. The technology came from an Atlanta startup called Seaport Solutions that came up with this idea and the technology. It was brought to scale by Newell Rubbermaid, one of our large companies in Atlanta, and they're selling this product worldwide. So that's a perfect example right there in Nashville, Georgia. We're bringing access to good health care using Georgia technology that came from a startup and one of our larger companies. We'll talk a little bit about stroke. You know, we're in the stroke belt in Georgia. It's a debilitating situation. If you get a stroke, what's critical is to get access to a stroke specialist very quickly. About 10 years ago, I got a call at work from my grandmother. And she said she was having a hard time moving her left leg. So I immediately went over, drove 10 minutes to go see her, and I could tell that, I'm not a doctor, but I could tell her left side of her face, left leg. I said, I'm afraid she's having a stroke. I've had some bad experiences even in Atlanta with ambulance, so I just carried her to my car and I got her to the emergency room immediately. Luckily, she was fine. They caught in time. She made a full recovery. But if I'd lived in rural Georgia, that might not be the case. She could have had a debilitating injury, or she may have died. What MCG did 10 years ago in Georgia, now Georgia Regents University, is set up a system and worked with 12 rural hospitals so that if you can just get to that rural hospital, they will 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, have someone on call who's an expert, either at the hospital in Augusta or at a third location. Connect the patient with this doctor through technology and allow the doctor to evaluate the patient and determine what medication to give them in a timely basis to save lives. Isn't that great? Well, Grady Hospital in Atlanta is doing the same thing. Bernie Marcus was very generous and gave a large donation to Grady to create the Marcus Stroke Center. It's one of the top-rated stroke centers in the country, and they've partnered with 60 rural hospitals in Georgia. So if you imagine now, here we have in multiple communities in our state, they have access to some of the best stroke care in the country. That's what technology can do. And guess what? What do we know about technology? It constantly gets smaller and faster and cheaper. Just 2 years ago, Emory won an award for a study they did in doing stroke evaluation, the same thing that MCG is doing with this other more expensive equipment, with an iPhone. Now, think where this might go. Think what we can do. Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, who is head of the Georgia Department of Public Health, has just announced that she wants to put public health in the cloud in Georgia. And she has done it. In 180, every single county has a public health department, and there are several other departments. 180 departments now have been wired for telemedicine. And so they're open to anyone that can use them. It's a public resource. Imagine what would happen if we go back to making house calls with this kind of technology. The Georgia Charity Care Network is already saving the state millions of dollars a year because they, at no cost to taxpayers, recruit doctors who provide care to indigent and uninsured patients all around the state. Think if we put this technology in their hands. Think if you could take these individuals and train a whole new type of medical technician worker that could go into the homes of indigent families and deliver this health care. I don't know about you, but how many times has the doctor left the room and 2 minutes later you can't remember what he told you? Well, if you have somebody there, you do a telemedicine visit and you have somebody there to remember what the doctor said and walk their way through their treatment plan, it's going to be much more effective. So it's a combination of technology and the human touch. And I think we have a great opportunity to really be a leader in this area. Education. Part of getting every child access to a great teacher is what Dr. Millo was talking about, is personalizing learning for every child. And the Georgia Department of Education has adopted this goal. And we are well on our way to making it a reality. Let me tell you what we're doing. 15,000 students in Georgia are already taking advantage of some form of online learning, whether it's blended in a brick and mortar institution or completely virtual. We have 11 different providers, 3 full-time virtual schools, the largest of which is the Georgia Cyber Academy, that enrolls over 10,000 students. They have a student in every county in our state. Their kids are enrolled for a variety of reasons, for more rigor, or because they're traveling, or because they're medically unable to go to school, or because they're being bullied. I mean, there are tremendous numbers of reasons, but we've made that available at no cost. Courses. Did you realize that we have 103 certified physics teachers in Georgia? Just checked the numbers last year. And we have over 450 high schools. That means that we say we're focusing on STEM education, but only about half of our schools even offered physics last year, according to the Professional Standards Commission. Now, online, we have 120 courses available through these 11 providers. Not only is it the Georgia Virtual School run by the Georgia Department of Education, but also school systems like Gwinnett and Cobb and Forsyth. Now imagine, we can tell people that come to Georgia, it doesn't matter where you live, you can have access to a Gwinnett County quality of education. That's pretty exciting. In fact, if you don't believe me, you're not going to be able to read this slide. This is part of the course list of our online offerings. And yes, it includes both traditional physics and AP physics. In addition to that, so we have the school enrollment, we have the course choice, but we also have 22,000 resources that are available to every teacher today in Georgia. So if a child is stuck or they need more differentiated instruction, the teachers can send those lessons to them. It includes Khan Academy and many other resources. They've been vetted by professionals. They are all approved by Georgia teachers. All of these classes, by the way, are taught by Georgia certified teachers. But imagine a teacher that has a classroom of 30 students and they're in 6th grade. A third of the students may be struggling to read, and so they are just bewildered with the content. Another third of the students are going on to a research university somewhere else, and they are bored stiff because you've had to repeat the content 4 or 5 times. In a personalized learning situation, these kids can move at their own speed, just like what Dr. Miller can talk about, and then the teacher can spend more time on individualized instruction. It's not all about statistics. It is about people. Every one of those dropout statistics is a life, and it's a life of someone that may end up struggling. This is Jalen. Jalen's in 5th grade. He attends an elementary school in Detroit, Michigan. In fact, it's not just any elementary school. It's one of the worst performing elementary schools in Detroit, Michigan, whose overall system is not doing real well.
Probably not.
They asked Jalen what he wanted to be when he grew up. This is what he said. He said, I want to be a CIA agent. I want to be a patriot. I want to protect our country. That's my dream. And no one's going to discourage me from that dream. Well, no one told Jalen that the statistics say he only has a 9% chance of even graduating from college. That's the great thing about kids. You know, they really think up here until us adults bring them down to here. But Detroit did something about it. Their superintendent said, I want to bring in what they call a portfolio approach to our schools. I'm going to bring in a lot of different alternatives. And one of the people he called on was Sergeant George, who you've heard here present at this forum. Sergeant created a nonprofit educational organization called Matchbook Learning that manages schools and incorporates technology and great teaching. Sergeant went up and took over this school, and the results in the first year have been absolutely tremendous. Many of the kids in that school have gained 2 to 3 years, made 2 to 3 years of progress in one academic year, because they've adopted the mastery learning, where they don't go forward until they've mastered the content, which they can do with the technology. You know, these tests at the end of the year have been called autopsies. You know, we find out what's wrong with the kids, what they don't know, but it's too late. They've already moved on to the next grade. This is the key, and that means we're going to have to change policies. We're going to have to address our testing system. We're going to have to get rid of seat time restrictions that say you have to be in class this many hours. You know, right now, the time is the fixed unit of measurement, and the learning is variable. We need to make the learning constant and the time variable. And we need to fund our schools appropriately. You know, the funding formula in Georgia, which no one understands, it was created when I was a high school junior. And it is incredibly outdated, and it's time for it to be changed. We need to make it where the money follows the child, and it doesn't matter whether it's virtual or bricks and mortar or blended learning or public or private. It just matters whether that kid is getting access to great teaching and is able to learn. That's a great challenge for us. But I believe we can do it, so we got to do it for Jalen. I believe, and we believe at the foundation, that Georgia can be a leader in figuring out how to use technology to address access to health care and improve education. And we look forward to working with you to do just that. On behalf of the Georgia Public Policy Foundation and the Conservative Policy Leadership Institute, I want to thank all of you for giving us your day. We appreciate our sponsors. We appreciate your time. We look forward to working with you throughout the year. I want to thank the volunteers that we've had. I'll ask you to return your badges at the front desk when you leave, and we look forward to seeing you all next year. Thank you for coming.